lesson of history on the issue of immigration is very clear. Immigration is not necessarily, and not always, a bad thing. I should know. I'm an immigrant. I'm a beneficiary of the free movement of people. But you cannot have unfettered, unregulated migration. You cannot have a world without borders. And that is because the state, which is the fundamental political unit of the world, loses its legitimacy in the eyes of its own citizens if anybody can just cross the border and enjoy the benefits of citizenship. When it has been successful, think of the United States in the 19th century. Immigration has been, even on a very large scale, regulated and combined with policies to encourage the rapid assimilation and integration of the immigrants. There was no doctrine of multiculturalism in the 19th century that said that immigrants from Eastern Europe or Southern Europe should, as far as possible, preserve their native tongues and practices. On the contrary, they were strongly encouraged to become American as fast as they could. And by and large, their children and grandchildren did become Americans with amazing speed, and in defiance of the pessimism of nativists in the late 19th century who were convinced that you would never make Americans out of the Irish, or you would never make Americans out of the Italians. Today we face a similar kind of challenge. We have large-scale migration from Mexico, but we also have large-scale migration from the Muslim world. The Muslim population of the United States, by some estimates, is growing faster today than the Muslim population of any European country, at about 5% a year, driven by quite large-scale migration from Muslim countries all over the world. This should not pose a problem, but it will if we allow multiculturalism to dictate that assimilation and integration are optional, and that if they wish, Muslims in America can live under Sharia law. Those people who make that kind of argument fundamentally misunderstand what immigration is about. If you come to the United States and aspire to become an American citizen, you must accept that the Constitution is the ultimate law of the land. Sharia law cannot be above it. You must accept that there is a separation of politics and religion. That is part of the hardwiring of the American system.
When I look at where we are today, the values and principles that we hold dear in Western, liberal democratic societies, they cannot exist without the rule of law. When you go back and you think about forcing King John to sign the Magna Carta, when you think about the Constitution of the United States of America, it all starts with the rule of law. If you have people that believe the rule of law is not important, that they can thumb their nose at it, and that you will have mob rule instead, or the rule of certain individuals, then you will undermine the very thing that makes us unique, and the very reason why people come here from other places where they don't have the same freedoms and opportunities and liberties.
In order to get rid of a bad idea, you have to have the proliferation of good ideas and let them battle it out in the marketplace of ideas. What political correctness does is it declares war on the marketplace of ideas, and it says, you can't talk about that, that's offensive. And why that's so dangerous and why it's such a chilling effect on free speech is because when you judge things or punish speech or ideas because they're offensive, because they're hate speech, the speaker doesn't know until after the fact what is going to be offensive. So what happens is you have a society that's self-censoring out of fear of being offensive. Or in Europe, for example, fear of jail time, because they actually put people in Europe in jail for hate speech. Fortunately, in the United States, that's not the case. We have Supreme Court ruling after Supreme Court ruling saying that the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution protects even the most vile of speech, even the most offensive speech, because the Supreme Court has recognized that even the most offensive speech is absolutely crucial for the marketplace of ideas to sort it out.
Rousseau wrote a book about the social contract that became one of the great tracts of the French Revolutionary era, Edmund Burke, the Anglo-Irish Whig philosopher, countered that the real social contract was between the dead, the living, and the unborn. It's one of the great lines in his reflections on the revolution in France. Burke seems to me to have got it right. Any civilization is only as good as the strength of that contractual bond between the past, the present, and the future, the dead, the living, the unborn. I think Western civilization at its best was extraordinarily good at thinking of posterity and also at respecting the legacy of the past. Today, we have breached the contract spectacularly. The word posterity seldom appears in politicians' speeches for a reason, because the politics of our era has essentially reversed the direction of the sacrifice. We used to sacrifice for the sake of future generations. That's why my grandfathers fought in the world wars. They were very consciously fighting to make my life better. I hadn't even been born. In the post-war era, the generation that we call the baby boomers decided to switch things around and encourage posterity to sacrifice for them.
I think that the key to the question of Western civilization is the preservation of moral confidence. Does one have it? Do you feel it? Can you articulate it? Can you explain why what this civilization has created and become is so precious that it should be maintained? Can one explain it well enough to one's children? Can one build the institutions that can actually keep it alive? This is not anything that one can take for granted. And the idea that one can just really take it for granted is in itself very destructive.
It's vitally important to stand up for democracy. Not just democracy as in voting, democracy as in freedom. And it's what the great Soviet refusenik Natan Sharansky, then known as Anatoly Sharansky, taught us from a Soviet prison, is that the belief in freedom and the commitment to freedom has to guide our thinking and our moral moments as we embrace our own collective self-concept as Western moral actors in a world whose moral fabric is being unwound by radical elements all around us.
What do Jews and Christians share? What is it that sort of binds the Western story together? For me, that story is bound together by the Hebrew Bible. And Jews and Christians, unlike Jews and other groups in the world, or Christians and other groups in the world, we share a text. We actually share a physical text. You can point to a word, I can point to a word, and we can argue over what it means. And that's unique, I think, among world civilizations. And what comes out of that text, the ideas, the values, the stories, those are the guts of the West. That is the stuff that makes us who we are. These are the reference points for literature, for modern philosophy. This is the thought world that we all operate in. And a lot of people want to pretend like that's not true. Moving into sort of a post-Christian or post-religious future. But the fact of the matter is that is who we are. And to the extent that we try to forget that, the more confused and aimless our civilization will be.
It's not about left or right. It's about all of us. It's about the future of our children and grandchildren. It's about the future of the globe.
Whether you, watching this film, consider yourself Western or not, Western civilization, broadly defined as the ideas that emanated from Europe and its offshoots in the 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th centuries, had more benefits and has more benefits than costs. Nobody claims that it was perfect, because Western civilization has been in a constant process of self-improvement and will continue to improve itself. But it may also destroy itself if we collectively forget